So I'm going to start off by asking, what if I could tell you that you could have a positive impact on retention, productivity, and recruiting? Does that sound nice? All right, good. And how about if you can do so without spending a single euro? Even nicer, right? Yeah, that's what I like to hear. So my name is Jesper Vik. I am a part of the business travel team at Airbnb. So I've been at Airbnb for a little over 3.5 years now, and I spend most of my time talking to companies, travelers, and business travelers. So over the years, we've gained a lot of insights, and I really want to share some of those insights with you today and have you leave with at least one concrete idea of how you can turn the business travel experience into a more positive one for your employees. So let's start by talking a little bit about business travel in general. So we're now doing over 800 million business trips a year. And we're spending over $300 billion on accommodation alone. So that's a lot of money, first of all, and a lot of people out there traveling on behalf of their companies. And we have all this great technology to make this easier, and yet a lot of travelers are dissatisfied with the status quo. Now, we're going to talk about how we can try to make them more happy, but I think it'll be interesting for us first to touch on why they're unhappy or dissatisfied in the first place. And to do so, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the world is changing. So, there are more and more people on the planet, and it's in a way forcing us to change the ways that we're living our lives and the way that we consume. This here is a graph showing the global population. And we're going to be talking mostly about the yellow bars close to the middle there, the millennials, which I'm sure you've heard about plenty of times. I am one myself, and millennials are now entering the workforce in great numbers. So by 2020, it's estimated that millennials will make up more than half of the global workforce. So that's 2.5 years from now, more than 50% of the global workforce will be millennials, which is quite remarkable, and it's quite soon. Give it a couple of more years and we'll be joined by the next generation, which is an even larger generation. Some call it the Gen Z, others call it the Centennials. Regardless, they'll also be entering the workforce, and by 2025 will together comprise the vast majority of the workforce. It might seem very obvious, and why am I telling you this? Well, it's because these two generations have different attitudes and mindsets than the previous one. And here's one example. So, millennials value experiences over ownership. More than 3 out of 4 millennials would rather spend their money on a desirable experience than a desirable item. So you might say that they rather spend their money on going on a trip rather than buying a flat screen TV, or going to concerts rather than buying a nice stereo system. Another thing is that they're way more serious about climate change. And so this just illustrates the difference between the younger and the older parts of a population when it comes to attitudes towards lowering emissions. And as you can see, the gap is quite significant, especially in some cases here. And so with these changes in attitudes towards climate, services that we use, economy, together with the incredible advancements that we see in technology these days, a lot of new services and products have emerged. Airbnb is one of them, and these are definitely changing the ways that we're living our personal lives. But how about our business lives? So, as I mentioned, we're spending over $300 billion on accommodation alone per year. That's a lot. And if you add in flights, ground transportation, dinners, and all that stuff, the number is even bigger. And so T&E, or travel and expenses, is actually the second largest operating cost of a typical company, maybe after payroll or equipment rental. And because it's such a significant part of doing business, most companies will have a travel policy to try to manage this. Now, I'm guessing, and please raise your hand if you do, that you all have a travel policy of some sort at your companies? Yeah, most of you do. And then I'm very interested in learning, have you all been involved in shaping this travel policy or not? Not yet. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so none so far. And this is classic. So typically this has been driven by procurement over the last 20 years. And one of their main objectives is to contain costs. And the way that they've done so is by negotiating with hotels and airlines to get preferred rates in return for volumes. And they've gotten very, very good at doing so. And they've gotten so good that there's not really a lot left to be derived from these negotiations. We're kind of at the flat part of the curve there. And so what I really want to do today is take a look at how we can involve all of you in this discussion and take a look at the bigger picture. And not only cutting costs, but actually looking at how we can get the best outcome from these business trips. Yeah, travel policy. So, why do we go on these business trips in the first place? Typically, it's to add value to the company. So it might be in the form of new company or new customers, repaired equipment, happy clients, and typically we want to make sure that we add more value than the trip will cost. However, the cost of the trip is not only airfares and accommodation and expenses. It's more than that, and there's a couple of side effects to business travel that'll be there no matter what. They can be negative, they can be positive, but we need to consider these when we look at the total impact of business travel. And so if a company has a travel policy that's heavily tailored towards cost savings, this might go at the expense of the alternatives that the employees can use. So you might have a really bad place to stay or a horrible flight, and that will really impact all of these. I also mentioned that companies will use volumes as a negotiating chip to get better rates. Now this will inevitably limit the options of the traveler, which can also affect this negatively, especially if the options that are presented or available are not the options that the traveler prefers. So let's try to sum this up. World is changing. People on it are too. The way that we live our lives, the way that we consume is changing with it. But companies can be quite slow at recognizing this and also recognizing the new preferences of the people in their workforce. Couple of examples. You might prefer to fly Norwegian, the airline, or I'm in Amsterdam, maybe I should say KLM. Either way, Norwegian has a very new fleet, new planes, it's very green. You have Wi-Fi on their planes, and oftentimes they're cheaper than the alternatives. But a lot of companies might not recognize them as options for the employees. Another example, ground transportation. Some people might prefer to use a ride-sharing company like Lyft or Uber, that I'm sure you've heard about. And it might not be recognized as an option by the company. And I have a personal story here. We're allowed to use more or less whatever we want. However, I ended up in a taxi here in Amsterdam once. I was going down to the Sotas, I don't know if I said that right, but the business district for a meeting. And we go there, hop in the cab, drive down there, we get to the destination, and I'm about to pay. And turns out the guy doesn't take Visa, he doesn't take Amex, and I didn't have any cash. So I was out of luck. We had to go to the closest ATM, withdraw money, go back to the meeting place. I was, of course, late to the meeting, and it was quite stressful. And these are just some examples of how sometimes you can be asked to live your business life different from how you'd prefer to live your personal life. And this is really a big issue, and I would say especially now that the lines between work and personal life is kind of dissolving. And we heard this in the first session as well. In 2020, so many people will be more independent, we'll be working from our phones, we'll be working from wherever as long as we're connected. And I really like this quote from Richard Branson here. He says, I don't think of work as work and play as play. To me, it's all living. And I really think that is true. And then it's more important that we empower employees with the tools that they prefer to use in their personal lives so they can also use them for work. So I just gave examples of airlines and ground transportation. Now I want to dig quickly into accommodation. This is obviously true for accommodation as well. Me working at Airbnb, this is where I have the most insights. And so the reason why Airbnb has a business travel team in the first place is because we did some research on our platform a couple of years ago, and we found that the 10% of all the bookings were business trips. Quite significant, and we wanted to learn more. Mind you, this was before we actually built the business travel program, so these people were most likely out of company policy when making these bookings, which made it even more interesting for us to learn why. And so we put together a research team, had them talk to business travelers from all over the world, and they were able to discover a couple of common pain points. Now, first pain point was monotony. And so this was really an overarching theme that we heard from the travelers. They felt this sense of repetitiveness and predictability. And this here is a hotel room in Paris. Pretty nice hotel room from a respectable brand. And if you were to travel with the same brand to other destinations around the world, this is what you'd find. And so again, overarching theme here is repetitiveness, predictability. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people will really appreciate the consistency that this chain is providing. It's just the fact that the people that we were talking to pointed towards the fact that no matter where they went, it was more or less the same experience. And remember, I just touched on how millennials value experiences over ownership. This can really represent a lost opportunity and actually turn something that could be very positive into a negative. So you might have someone who's going to Shanghai and Manila and Paris for work, and they feel like they're missing out on all these fantastic experiences they could have while they're traveling the world, which is a shame. Second pain point is loneliness or the sense of disconnection. So, when talking to these business travelers, we're able to uncover kind of sad and often unspoken truth that business travelers can be some of the loneliest people on the planet. And this is just a couple of quotes from a business traveler called Scott from Los Angeles. And he's pointing towards the fact that when he's traveling for business, he feels kind of more like a number than a person and like a stranger in a strange land. So I just imagine Scott in the hotel bar or one of the big international hotel or restaurant chains close to it in the business area, together with all the other business travelers, and very disconnected from the actual city or the actual area that they're visiting. And then our third pain point here is the sense that life is on hold. So when you're traveling for business, you're essentially away from your home, which also means you're away from your friends, your family, your hobbies. So you're going to have to scratch that basketball practice, no dinner with friends that week. You might miss your mother's birthday. And it can really be a big sacrifice for people to actually go on these trips. And so I'm going to play a video from an interview we did with a business traveler called Megan. And she's talking a little bit about her experience when going on business trips.
Yeah, so it was business travel like before Airbnb. It was just like, let's just like grin and bear it and get this done so I can go home. When I go to a hotel at the end of a day, I am alone and I feel worse. I feel way worse. I feel super lonely. My less great self comes out. It's like the person who just like wants to watch TV and like, you know, or go crazy working. Like, so it's either like working, watching TV, like going to bed, like not talking to anybody. And you end up feeling kind of gross afterwards.
So yeah, that was Megan. And from hearing from her and the other business travelers, it seems like business travel can be quite miserable. Luckily, it doesn't have to be. And there are things that we can do to make it better for them. So now I want to present some findings from a research report done by the MMGY group in 2016 on traveler friction. And they were asking road warriors just being people who travel a lot, on average in this case 88 nights per year, so a significant amount. And they were asked if they could add something to their travel policy, what would it be? And here are the findings. So we can read these real quickly. Non-stop flights is on the top there. Ability to choose more comfortable or convenient hotels. Flying business. Paid time off after a long trip. Premium economy on domestic flights, and the ability to work from home after or before a trip. And how do these look to you guys? Do you think that these would be things that would be nice to be able to offer your employees? I take it the answer is yes. And the idea with these benefits is that by offering them, you can have a positive impact on those side effects of travel that we touched on earlier. So motivation, willingness to travel, retention, and in the long term also recruiting. And also another fact is the fact that if you can offer these more comfortable alternatives, better flights, your employees can be more rested, more motivated, so that when they're actually on their trip to do their business, they'll be more effective at doing it, and they might get a better business outcome out of it. Happier clients, they might be able to close that deal. So the idea here is that not only do you get a better business outcome, you also influence all these other factors, and I'm sure you better than anyone else know the cost of replacing an employee or employees who burn out and so on. And so by making this investment, which is not necessarily a big one, you might get huge returns. Now I realize that making the case for this internally at your companies might be difficult. I'm going to have to pull together some data and show why it makes sense to spend more money on travel. I did start off by saying that I could tell you how to increase retention, productivity, and recruiting without spending a single euro. And there actually is an alternative here that you can do for free. And that's the ability to choose more comfortable and or more convenient hotels. Now I'd like to call this accommodation instead. And this is where Airbnb comes in. So we launched a business travel program a couple of years back, which allows you to offer Airbnb to your employees, a bunch of features and functions that I'll touch on a little bit later. And it's totally free. In fact, most companies who are using it now are seeing savings of 20 to 40%. So it could be an easy case to make at your companies to your fellow stakeholders.
Yeah, and with Airbnb, it kind of reminds me more that I'm just basically myself while I'm traveling. Yeah, I stayed with these two guys who were adorable. They wanted me to see the view from the Museum of Modern Art near there. And so he was afraid that I wouldn't be able to find the rooftop. And so they drove me over there, got out of the car, he walked me up, talked to all the security guards, and took me out. And just that trip was an amazing trip. It was just it belongs with the amazing trips of my life, which is this is what I'm realizing is that work travel can be like that for me. I cannot afford to look at business travel as something separate from my life anymore. It doesn't make sense, not when you travel a lot.
Yeah, so this is just Megan then telling us how she felt after she could start using Airbnb. Quite positive, and I really love the fact that she's saying she can't afford to look at business travel as something that is separate from her life anymore. It doesn't make sense. I really think this is true from all the conversations that we're having with business travelers around the world, and very interesting insight. I'll show you some quotes from a couple of other business travelers that are talking about how Airbnb makes them feel. Some choose Airbnb because of the amenities and the comforts. So you can have an apartment, have a little bit of extra space with a bedroom, separate kitchen, living room, you can cook your own stuff, it feels more cozy and more homey. While others are looking for that sense of connection, so they can stay in certain neighborhoods that they prefer and actually indulge themselves in the local cultures. I had a very interesting talk with a consultant whose name is Nikki. She will be going to the same city over and over again and work with different clients, and so typically an assignment for her would be from 4 to 8 weeks. And so she would go to the same city, be there for 3 to 4 days, work with the client, and then go back home on Friday or Thursday. And she was telling me how miserable she felt, and she could check all of the boxes. You know, she felt lonely, she felt like her life was on hold, and she was sitting in her room eating the same Caesar salad or club sandwich every other day. Now her company is using Airbnb for business, and they're actually able to book somewhere for her for the duration of the whole assignment. So if it's a 6-week thing, they can book an apartment for the whole duration of the stay. They'll still actually save money while doing so. And the best part now is that she actually has kind of a second home to come to when she's going to that city, and she can actually leave her business clothes there. You know, she can have some food in the fridge from the last time, so when she comes on a Monday morning, she has a couple of eggs, some juice in the fridge, and she is super excited about this. And I'm very happy that she is now more happy about her business trips than she used to be. Another guy who's very happy about his business trip is this guy, Jeff Weiner. He's the CEO of LinkedIn, and this is just a tweet that he wrote when he tried Airbnb for the first time. And it's quite cool. First Airbnb stay, available despite no hotel vacancies, twice the quality, quarter the price. Good luck competing with that. And I really like the comments as well, whether he'd change anything about the experience, where he answers nothing. Nice to hear. And, you know, when adding a new service for your company, of course, it's not going to be adapted by everyone, but there's going to be one group who will really like it and appreciate it. So that's true for Airbnb as well. And then you'll have another group who will probably never even consider using it. People are very used to their typical hotels. They want to collect their points and so on. And then you have the largest group probably in the middle who might choose depending on the situation. So with Airbnb, for example, we have a couple of very typical use cases where we're popular. One being during conferences and big events. So you might go to an event. It's near impossible to find a hotel room, especially close to the place you want to be in. And if you can find one, the price might be through the roof. Just adding a little bit of extra inventory might help you find somewhere close to the place you want to be at an affordable price. Another scenario is group trips. Now, me and Theo, didn't introduce him in the beginning, but that's Theo, my French colleague, looks after France. We're staying in a 2-bedroom apartment in the east. Super nice. We have separate bedrooms, large living room, large kitchen, even a balcony. There were a couple of beers in the fridge that the host left for us, so it's premium. And it's really nice to be able to travel that way as a team. Even larger teams, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. It's just great to be together. It's more productive. We can get in the cab together to go here this morning, and at least I really like it. And then you have what is probably our largest use case, which is longer trips. So, you know, going to a city for 1 night, 2 nights, hotel is super convenient, in and out, don't really care that much. But if you're staying somewhere for 3 nights, a week, or even months like the consultant, Nikki, then you really start missing those comforts and conveniences of a home. So like having a kitchen so you can actually cook some of your meals at home, having stuff in the fridge, having a little bit more space and so on. So like I said, that's probably the most popular use case for Airbnb. And you know, adding alternatives like this, some people will greatly appreciate them, and that will positively affect then their motivation, retention rates, and in the long term, also recruiting. Touching back on retention, this is actually one of the main drivers of one of our big clients, Morgan Stanley, who wanted to be able to attract younger talents coming straight out of university and brand themselves more as a forward-thinking, innovative company. And they were quite successful at doing so. They were able to get some press around the fact that they're using the business travel program. And, you know, of course, when you're adding a new service, you need to make sure that it's meeting at least a minimum set of criteria, that it's compatible with your business, that it's safe. But I would really encourage all of you here to try to look for value in products or services that your employees are requesting. 2 examples of this, first one being Airbnb again. I mean, we launched this a couple of years ago with the help of a couple of large San Francisco companies who really wanted to be able to offer this to their employees. But in order to do so, they needed a couple of minimum things in place. Now that would be visibility into where their employees were traveling, and then reporting so they can have an overview of how much they were actually spending. Now, this wasn't too difficult to build, so we did that with them and launched a business travel program. And as more and more companies came along and signed up for the program, we heard more and more product feedback. And so the program grew, and now we're integrated with the largest travel management companies, we're working with the largest duty of care providers, and we've also launched new features like third-party bookings, where you can actually book on behalf of other people in your company. And also, quite recently, we've launched something called Business Travel Ready Listings, which we're very excited about. So this is a selection of, of units that are particularly good for business. So they'll be entire homes only, they'll have good reviews, and they'll have business amenities like an iron, hairdryer, laptop-friendly workspace, self-check-in, and so on. And you know, that has brought us to where we are today with pretty robust travel program with over 250,000 companies using it. And so that's just one example. Another one, who here has a smartphone? Everyone, right? So, 9 years ago or so when the iPhone was introduced, a lot of people really wanted this phone, and their companies wouldn't allow them to use it for work because the security team had no clue what to do with a smartphone. But as we know, people can be quite passionate about services, and especially Apple, and so they kept asking, and eventually the security team had to take a stance and figure out how can we allow these, and the rest is history. I guess we all have these now, so that's how that went. Finally, I just want to end off by saying that at Airbnb, we really believe that travel should and can be transformative, and there's no reason why business travel can't be as well. So, being able to add more options to your employees in a world where we love personalization and, providing or empowering your employees with the tools that they prefer will lead to less friction and more productivity. It also most likely lead to happier employees, which positively affect those things we were talking about in the beginning, like retention, motivation, productivity, and then in the long term, recruiting. So I really want to just encourage you all to keep looking out for these products and really engage yourself in the conversation. And then this relates to business travel. I think you really should have a seat at that table and try to influence how those programs are built.